Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to Mike's Expat Kitchen, where we cook German dishes with American ingredients. Today we're going to cook goulash soup, which is different than goulash. It's a hearty soup that you eat with bread at the end of a long ski day, for example. You're turning into this warm, hot, freezing from the cold outside, and are longing for a hearty meal. This is when they serve you goulash soup. To cook a big pot of the soup that feeds about 4 people, you're going to need about a pound of stew meat. What I typically buy is this pre-cut beef from Trader Joe's. These are sirloin steak tips, but you can also buy the regular beef. Basically, you want something that's not too fatty, but also not too lean. This is just about right. To thicken the soup, you're going to need lots and lots of onions. I use 3 medium-sized ones here. That clocks in at about 1 pound. Then for the veggie part of the soup, 2 potatoes, medium size. These are 2 russet potatoes, but gold potatoes also work. 1 medium-sized zucchini, 1 lemon that we're going to use the peel off, 1 full-size red bell pepper. If you want, you can mix red and yellow bell peppers, half of each. 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, depending on how spicy you want it. 2 bay leaves. They're called Lorbeer in German, which translates to laurels, the ones you shouldn't be resting on. 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika or sweet paprika. 2 cloves of garlic, finely minced. Half a teaspoon of majoram. And half a teaspoon of caraway seed. Kümmel in German. And lastly, we're going to need about a tablespoon of sour cream per serving. Oh, and a quart of chicken broth, because that's our soup base. Okay, now that was all of the ingredients. Now let's get started peeling those onions. I know, it's quite a chore to get all of these peeled and diced. And you might tear up a little bit. That's quite normal. I use a santoku knife here to cut them, but it's still a lot of work. And by the end of it, you should have a good plate or almost a pound of diced onions. Don't worry if they're not cut 100% evenly. They'll cook down to a thick soup base anyway. Next up, let's check the meat. If you buy a whole slab of sirloin steak, you have to cut that into pieces. But this pre-cut steak from Trader Joe's usually has the right size. Just check the individual pieces. They should all be about bite size. Some of them are a little bigger, so cut them down to the right size. Next up, heat up some cooking oil. I use grapeseed oil here over medium to high heat in a fairly large pot. You want something that's really wide. You can fry as many pieces as possible in one batch. When the oil is hot, dump all of the meat cubes into the pot and let them brown a little bit on the outside. The goal here isn't to cook the meat all the way through. It's just the outside that we want to take on some color. So keep stirring it to prevent the pieces from getting stuck to the bottom. Alongside the brown color, which has a lot of aroma to it, we want to add a tomato taste to the meat, which we do by adding tomato paste to the pot and stirring it so that it kind of burns into the meat. That's very essential to the final outcome. There's even a German word for it, tomatisieren, which kind of means tomato-wise. I'm not sure if there's an English word for that, but anyway, I guess that's part of the goulash taste, that the meat has a tomato aroma based on that paste that's been burned into it. Now, despite our best efforts stirring the pot, a bunch of brown bits are going to be stuck at the bottom. So we're going to use our secret cleaning agent, which is, believe it or not, our diced onions that we're going to add to the mix now. Stir them, and while we're doing that, they're going to wipe off anything that might have started to turn dark brown at the bottom of the pot. Continue doing that until the bottom is squeaky clean. And that's quite important because we don't want the off taste of charred meat, and we also don't want to ruin our kitchenware, of course. Now, we're ready to pour the entire quart of the chicken broth into the pot, heat it up one more time, and let it simmer for exactly 40 minutes. Set a timer for this. Now, while this is going, we have a lot of time to prepare our vegetables. First off, 1 regular size red bell pepper. You can mix red and yellow bell peppers In this case, you would use half a bell pepper each, but I use red bell peppers because I like them better. They're milder. Remove all the white parts and chop them into small strips, juliennes, as they say in the professional kitchens. Set that aside on an extra plate and then move on to the zucchini. We also want to cut that into rather small and evenly sized chunks. The zucchini is going to be cooked all the way through in the process, so it's okay if you just ballpark it. Next up are the 2 potatoes. Wash them and peel them, and then also cut them into chunks of roughly the same size. Put those aside as well on top of our veggie plate. And if your stew is still going, then you should cover that whole thing with some food wrap to prevent those from drying out. That completes our veggie ingredients preparation. Now we're going to make some seasoning paste that consists of parts lemon peel and some spices. For some extra flavor, I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic. You can double that amount if you're a fan of garlic. I tend to not go overboard with it, but a little extra flavor goes a long way. Cut that into relatively small chunks. Doesn't need to be chopped too finely because when we're making the paste later, it's all gonna be cut down even further. Now for the lemon peel, you're supposed to take an organic lemon for that. Cut that into small chunks as well and add it to the garlic as a second ingredient to our paste. Next up is half a teaspoon of majoram. Note that majoram is called majoram in German with an N at the end. Mix that into the paste, and then comes caraway seed, Kümmel in German. Also about half a teaspoonful. And you should use the whole caraway seed, not the powder, because we're going to chop everything finely now, which works best with a rocking tool, also called a mincing knife. And that might take you a couple of minutes rocking back and forth. The only way I know to accelerate this is to use a food processor, but it's typically more effort than it's worth because you have to clean the whole thing afterwards. But anyway, make sure that the paste is really finely chopped. That's the key ingredient to having a tasty goulash without having to chew on some spice parts. In the meantime, of course, we've kept an eye on our 40-minute stew and stirred it every once in a while. So after 40 minutes are over, it's time to add the vegetables from that extra plate that we prepared. Dump them all in, give it a good stir, and turn up the heat temporarily so that they warm up quickly. Along with those veggies, we also need to add some spices. A little bit of cayenne pepper. Don't go overboard with it. That's pretty spicy. So about a 1/4 teaspoon maybe. Then paprika, we need a lot more than that. I use a tablespoon of the smoked paprika, but you can also use sweet paprika, depending on what you prefer. 1 teaspoon of salt. That's not the final round of salt seasoning. We're going to do that later. Then add 2 of the bay leaves and stir everything. Then put the lid back on and let it cook for another 20 minutes. Once that is done, try to locate those bay leaves again in order to remove them. We don't want our guests to accidentally find them while enjoying our delicious goulash soup. Then turn off the heat entirely, that's right, because our stew is done at this point, and add the seasoning paste. Give it a good stir, again with the heat entirely turned off. Put the lid back on and let it sit there for another 5 minutes. After that time, let's take a quick sample and see if we seasoned everything correctly. It might need some more salt, so put that in, give it a good stir, and then our soup is ready to be plated. Break out your nice soup plates or bowls, and then ladle a good mix of the soup onto each plate. Make sure that several meat cubes and some veggies are sticking out so that you can see them on top of the soup. As a decoration, and also in order to tame down the spiciness of the soup, add 1 scoop of sour cream on top. Goulash soup is best served with some bread on the crunchy side. Here's a slice of my home-baked tartine-style sourdough bread, but baguette also works. As for the perfect beer pairing, I would recommend Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, one of the first microbrew ales that I'm aware of in the US. Very neutral and ideal for the spicy goulash soup. Guten Appetit! If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more episodes of Mike's Expat Kitchen, please subscribe to the channel.